I never imagined that a simple family cookout, something so routine, so familiar, would leave me gasping for air, clawing at the surface of Lake Willowbrook while my grandson laughed. My sweet Ethan. Or at least that's who he used to be. Now at 19 he stood tall, flashing a grin that never reached his eyes, and shoved me, his own grandmother, straight into the water. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't playful roughhousing that got out of hand. No, it was intentional, calculated, and vicious. I heard his voice just moments before I felt his cold hands press against my back. "Come on, Grandma. Let's see if you can still swim." Then the shove came. My body twisted as I let out a scream, but it was already too late. My feet left the dock and I hit the lake like a stone. The shock punched the air from my lungs. My arms and legs froze. My chest burned as I tried to scream again, but only swallowed more lake water. I hadn't swum in over 30 years. After surgery, my doctor warned me not to risk it, not with my fragile shoulder and fading coordination. But no one moved. Not a single person on that dock so much as flinched. I thrashed, panic surging as the water pulled me under. When I finally surfaced, coughing and choking, I managed to catch a glimpse of their faces. Ethan stood there, arms crossed, laughing alongside his friends. My son, his father, just watched while my daughter-in-law sipped her wine and muttered, "She's being dramatic." I don't even remember how I made it out. Maybe it was instinct, maybe fear, or maybe some small reserve of strength I didn't realize I still had. Somehow I crawled back onto the dock, soaked and trembling, my knees scraped raw, my heart pounding painfully inside my chest. No one reached out to help. Not a single one of them. Ethan looked down at me and smirked. "Guess you can swim after all. Tough old bird, huh?" They all laughed. That laughter stuck in my ears long after everything went quiet. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there, water dripping from my clothes, more humiliated than I'd ever been. Margaret's words from last week echoed in my mind then. People show who they really are when they think you need them. Slowly, I walked back to the picnic table, aching and soaked, while they returned to flipping burgers and opening another bottle of wine, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't nearly drowned for their entertainment. No apology. No concern. And in that moment I knew. This was it. The moment the wool finally fell from my eyes. The moment I stopped making excuses for them. The moment I let go of the little boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the yard. That boy was gone. What stood in his place was someone shaped by people who cared more about appearances than kindness. Who taught him that cruelty could pass for confidence. Who let him believe love came without consequence. I sat there in my dripping clothes, silent. That silence, once mistaken for weakness, wasn't weakness anymore. This time it was a promise, a warning, a beginning. Because as I looked at that dock, my family laughing, my body aching, my heart breaking, I saw something they didn't. I still had choices. That boy forgot who controlled his college fund. Back at the house, I peeled off my wet clothes and dried myself off with an old, thin towel I always kept for guests. The one no one else ever touched. Staring into the mirror, I saw my tangled hair, my scraped knees, my eyes red from the lake water. I looked like a ghost. Yet when I stepped back into the kitchen, there they were, chatting about vacation plans, laughing over flights to Clearwater Bay, debating which Airbnb had the better view. No one turned to look at me. No one asked how I was feeling. No one even offered a blanket. Ethan scrolled through his phone, barefoot, leaving little puddles on my clean kitchen floor from his damp swim trunks. My son leaned against the counter, sipping the lemonade I had made earlier that morning. And my daughter-in-law, that polished statue of indifference, sat showing Ethan photos of beach resorts like today had been just another sunny afternoon. It was like I wasn't even there. I sat down at the corner of the breakfast table, my bones still shaking from the cold, my cardigan clinging to my back, but nobody saw. Nobody cared. I wanted to scream, not from pain but from disbelief. How did it come to this? Remember. God help me, I do. There was a time when Ethan would throw his little arms around my neck and say, "You're the best part of this house, Grandma." I remember Sunday mornings filled with pancakes and cartoons, his little head resting against my arm. Now he mocked drowning with his friends and laughed as I fought for breath. This didn't happen overnight. That kind of cruelty has to be taught. And I knew exactly where he learned it. From the smirks, the eye rolls, the times his parents dismissed my concerns, ridiculed my old-fashioned ways, whispered about me when they thought I was asleep. From the way they used my home, my money, my time, until I became more of an inconvenience than a person. And now I sat there in my own kitchen, shivering while they planned their next getaway. I let the silence stretch, let it fill the air like thick fog. I wanted to see if any of them would notice. They didn't. So I stood up, calm as always. Quiet. I walked into my bedroom, gently closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed where I used to read Ethan bedtime stories. The lake water was gone from my skin, but not from my heart. That stayed. That shame. That burn. And I finally realized, I'd been drying off from their behavior for years. Every time they forgot my birthday. Every time they asked for money and never once said thank you. Every time they spoke over me, brushed me aside, or laughed in my face. That shove into the lake. It was only the first time they did it where the whole world could see. I pulled out my journal and wrote a single sentence. They will never get the chance to drown me again. Because starting tonight I wasn't just drying off. I was waking up. That night, long after the house had fallen silent, I sat alone in my locked bedroom, the old lamp beside me humming softly. I couldn't sleep. Not with that image of Ethan, my Ethan, laughing as I fought to stay afloat. It haunted me. Not just because it was cruel, but because it was him. I didn't raise that boy like a distant grandmother who visited for holidays. No. I raised him when his parents couldn't bother. When his father lost his job for the third time and the bank came calling, guess where Ethan landed? Right here. In my house. In my arms. I fed him, bathed him, read to him, comforted him through every nightmare. I was listed on every emergency contact form. I paid his school tuition when his parents couldn't. I built his world. I still remember the day he got his first keyboard. I bought it secondhand from a music teacher who was retiring. I spent nearly half my savings on it, and he sat cross-legged on the floor for hours, pressing each key like it was pure magic. "Grandma," he said, "this is better than Christmas." And I remember thinking, this child, he feels deeply. Where did that boy go? Things started shifting when he turned 16. The phone was glued to his hand. He stopped sitting at the dinner table. His thank yous turned into grunts. Eye contact? Gone. At first I blamed it on the teenage years. They're moody, I told myself. He still loves you. He's just growing. But it wasn't that. He didn't just grow. He changed. The little signs were everywhere. Snide remarks, mocking how I stirred my tea, rolling his eyes when I told my stories. I should have said something then. I should have confronted him. But I was too scared to rock the boat. I didn't want to lose him. Instead I lost myself. I let him talk over me. I let his parents laugh while he dismissed me. I faded into the background of my own home. The same boy who once cried when I scraped my knee in the garden, who used to kiss my cheek and ask if angels aged, now stood in my kitchen making drowning jokes. And the worst part? I still wanted to believe some of that sweet boy was left. But tonight I let that hope go. I closed the last photo album I had of him, pages filled with gap-toothed smiles and birthday candles, and put it on the shelf. Not to forget. To protect myself. Because love without boundaries isn't love. It's servitude. And I've served enough. Let his parents brag about his college applications, his Instagram followers, his sense of humor. Let them clean up what they've created. The next morning I told everything to Margaret. I needed comfort. I needed someone who would simply listen. And Margaret always did. She's been my best friend for 30 years. We've weathered every storm together, and she stood by me through every high and low. The next morning there was a knock at my kitchen door. Never the front door. Margaret always came through the side like she owned the place. "Open up, Charlotte." I brought muffins and opinions. I smiled before I even reached the door. There she was, wearing her oversized sunglasses and bright turquoise windbreaker, clutching a brown paper bag and 2 coffee cups like she was ready for battle. I didn't even get a word out before she said, "You look like hell." Sit. Oh, poor. And I sat, because with Margaret you don't argue. You just let her take care of you. "They did something, didn't they?" she asked. I nodded once. That was all she needed. She didn't gasp or say, "Oh honey," like most would. Instead she leaned forward, planted her elbows on the table and said, "Then it's time." "Time for what?" I asked. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Not a muffin. Not a napkin. A folder. My lawyer's card and every account you told me about last year when we did your taxes. I stared at her. "You kept that?" "I keep everything," she said. "Especially when my best friend is handing out her love and legacy like Halloween candy to people who'd shove her into a lake." I looked down at the card. Peter Holloway. Estate law. Simple font. The kind of man with a firm handshake. Oh no, I whispered. Feels so final. Margaret leaned back, crossed her arms and tilted her head. You want final? You just don't want guilt. That's different. She took a sip of her coffee and tapped the table. Listen to me. You paid for Ethan's school. You paid for his braces, his piano, his soccer trips. You let his parents live rent-free in your lake house for a whole summer, and still had to buy your own groceries that August. I wanted to help, I murmured. I know you did. You're better than them. That's the problem. I stared out the window. The azaleas were blooming. Cliff planted them for our anniversary. He always said they were stubborn flowers. Slow to open but impossible to kill. That's how I felt now. I don't want revenge, I said. Margaret reached across and squeezed my hand. Of course not. You want release. And she was right. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to set the house on fire or storm into Ethan's room demanding some apology he didn't even think I deserved. What I wanted was peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop begging people to see you. Margaret stood up and gently pulled me up by the shoulders. We're going into town, she said. You're going to eat something that didn't come out of a box and then we're calling Peter. I haven't been to that cafe in months, I admitted. Perfect, she smiled, grabbing her keys. Let them see what real strength looks like. Cardigans, crow's feet and all. As we drove, windows rolled down, the wind tangled itself in my thinning hair, and a simple thought hit me, one that stopped me cold. I hadn't felt this alive in years. And all it took was someone reminding me I was still mine. The cafe buzzed with life, the sound of dishes clattering and conversations blending together like an old familiar song. Margaret stirred sugar into her espresso like she was mixing a magic potion, then slid the second cup across the table toward me. Drink up, she said. You're going to need backbone and caffeine. He was right. We called Peter Holloway right after lunch. He told me to come in that afternoon. Bring everything you've got and don't sugarcoat it, he said. And I didn't. I carried in the original trust documents, the binder Frank and I put together after his stroke, and a folded copy of the university fund letter from when Ethan was still in middle school, back when he would proudly show me his report cards. I could still remember printing that letter. I had been so proud, so full of hope. $50,000, I murmured as Peter flipped through the papers. I started putting it aside when he was 10. Birthday money, work bonuses, tax returns, even skipped a vacation one year. Frank and I agreed. Education came first. Peter looked up, his brows furrowed. It's all still here, untouched. He hasn't needed any of it yet? No, I said quietly. He's in community college now. Says he plans to transfer next year. That was always the plan, until he decided I didn't belong on that dock or in his life. Peter didn't ask any more questions. He just nodded, calm and focused like a surgeon before an operation. What do you want to do, Charlotte? Change the beneficiary? Redirect the funds? Close it all together? I stared up at the ceiling for a moment, then whispered, nothing. Not yet. Peter raised an eyebrow. I want to watch, I said. I want to see how they treat me when they think I'm frail, when they believe they're this close to inheriting. I want to see who pretends to care and who actually shows up. Peter slowly closed the file. That's cold, he said. That's survival, Margaret added, leaning in. We're not burning bridges today, Peter. We're just checking which ones were never real to begin with. Peter smiled faintly. Fair enough. We left his office about an hour later, everything legally untouched, but my perspective had changed forever. That fund wasn't a gift anymore. It was a mirror. I spent the rest of the evening pacing my home like I was walking through someone else's life. I stopped at the mantel where Ethan's baby photo still stood. Those dimples, that grin, that feeling of safety. I didn't take it down. Not yet. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a fresh page in my journal. At the top I wrote, let's see who loves me without the money. Below it I drew 2 columns, who notices and who avoids. I didn't even need to write Ethan's name. I already knew where it belonged. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. Because for all their secret planning, for all their whispered schemes about who would get what when I was too tired to fight back, they forgot one thing. I still held the pen. And I wasn't done writing the ending. I started small, a stumble here, a slower step there. I'd pause mid-sentence, touching my forehead like I forgot what I was saying. I let my hands tremble just a little when pouring tea, enough to make the cup rattle on the saucer. And the results were instant. Not concern. Not kindness. Annoyance. Ethan stopped saying hello when he came through the door. Now it was just a grunt. If even that. If I asked for help bringing in groceries, he'd let out a loud sigh like I'd asked him to lift a car. My son Michael started whispering in the kitchen when he thought I was asleep. She's getting worse. I don't think she's taking her meds. I can't keep cleaning up after her. His wife, Rebecca, always quick to play the concerned daughter-in-law at church, didn't even pretend behind closed doors. She left the stove on again, she said one night, too loudly, too fake. That's dangerous, Mike. What if Ethan was here alone? He was always here alone. But no one ever worried about him. The truth is, I never left the stove on. I checked it twice and again before bed. But I didn't argue. I let them believe it. I let them build their little case against me. They thought they were playing chess. They didn't realize I was playing a much longer game. At night, I would lay in bed listening to their muffled voices through the wall. They never used my name, just her and she. She needs help. She's becoming a burden. She can't even manage her own money. That last part nearly made me laugh out loud. My ledger sat right there in my sock drawer. Every transaction, every account balanced to the penny. The university fund untouched. The home equity still fully in my name. And still they counted me out like I was already gone. One morning I walked into the kitchen and saw Ethan and Rebecca sitting at the table whispering. They froze the moment they noticed me, but not before I caught one word. Facility. Ethan glanced at me like I was some object, not a person. She didn't hear that, he mumbled. I poured my coffee slowly, letting the silence spread thick between us. I stared out the window at the garden Frank and I had built from scratch. Our sanctuary. The hydrangeas were blooming again. Stubborn things just like us. I spoke aloud to no one in particular. I'm old. But I'm not deaf. Neither of them responded. That's when I realized. They were trying to push me out before I had a chance to draw my own line. So I let them think I was slipping. Let them whisper. Let them believe their little story. I shrank myself in their eyes so that soon I could disappear entirely. And when I did, they would feel that silence like thunder. That night, I opened my journal again and drew another line next to Ethan's name under the "Who Avoids" column, underlining it twice. Next to Michael and Rebecca's names, I wrote, "They want the house, not the woman inside it." I closed the book and smiled into the dark. Let them whisper. I was listening to every word. A week later came the moment that pushed me over the edge. It was Rebecca's idea. Some little dinner party for her yoga friends and Michael's work buddies. "We'll grill, keep it casual. Maybe you can make that lemon cake they all love." I said nothing. Out of habit, maybe even out of old sentiment, I baked the cake. But I didn't plan on staying long. The house filled with the smell of grilled meat and expensive perfume. Laughter floated off the back patio like smoke, thin, rising, choking. I stayed in the kitchen out of sight. No one noticed. Not even Michael, who used to peek in at 12 years old to ask if I needed help with the dishes. I stood by the sink listening. Always listening. Then I heard Ethan's voice, sharp and dripping with the smug sarcasm he'd learned from Rebecca. "So get this," he told his circle of half-drunk guests. "Grandma fell in the lake at the barbecue. She flailed like a flipped turtle. Oh, help me, help me." Laughter erupted. Real deep laughter. And he kept going. I'm like, "Dude, you're not actually drowning." He probably just wanted sympathy. You know how old people are, they weaponize helplessness. Someone chuckled and muttered, "That's dark, Ethan." Ethan laughed harder. "No, she's fine. Tough old bird. Tough old bird." That's all I was to him. Not the woman who paid for his braces. Not the one who stayed up late with him during his asthma attacks. Not the one who kept every single drawing he ever made in a binder under her bed. Just a bird. I stood frozen behind the sliding glass door, my hands trembling, not from age but from rage. Then I heard Rebecca's voice, soft and sharp like a knife. "She's a liability," she whispered. "Not family," I told Michael. "We need to think about the future, not sentiment." Liability. I'd felt disposable before. But this time it was final. I walked calmly to my room. No tears. No words. I sat down on the bed, their voices muffled behind the door, and I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even heartbroken. I was done. It was the clarity I had been waiting for. The signature on the invisible contract they'd written the day Ethan shoved me into that lake. I opened my bedside drawer and pulled out the envelope with Peter's card. I picked up my phone and stared at his number. Then I dialed. "Peter Holloway," he answered on the second ring. "It's Margaret." "I'm ready." He didn't ask what I meant. He simply said, "Come in tomorrow. Bring the documents. Bring your ID." I said, "I already have." After I hung up, I stepped back into the hallway. The laughter was quieter now, distant, like it belonged to strangers. The lemon cake still sat untouched on the counter. I cut one perfect slice. Not for them, for me. I sat at the kitchen table alone and ate it slowly. Let them laugh, let them drink, let them gossip. Let them pretend I was invisible. Because starting tomorrow they'd learn how invisible I could really become. And when that silence came, real silence, it wouldn't be weakness. It would be my exit. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the small desk in my room, the same one where I used to help Ethan write his college essays, and opened my laptop. The website for the Scholarship Foundation was already bookmarked. Frank and I had supported them for years. Quiet. Honest. Their motto: education should be earned, not inherited. I typed steadily, deliberately. Amount to donate, $50,000. Donor name: in memory of Frank James Walker. Designation: STEM Scholarship Fund for first-generation students. Anonymous: yes. Before I clicked confirm, I paused. My fingers hovered over the keys. I thought of Ethan at 9 years old, grinning with missing teeth, saying, "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to make machines that help people breathe better." He doesn't say things like that anymore. He doesn't say anything at all. Done. No second login. No confirmation email. Just a clean, permanent transfer. I closed the tab and didn't look back. Then I opened another window. Amtrak this time. One-way ticket. Departure: Sunday. Destination: Silver Pines, a quiet retirement community 2 states away. Margaret had a friend there who described it as peaceful but not dead. A garden. A shared workshop. Neighbors who played chess without cheating. Perfect. I chose the earliest morning train, quiet, unnoticed. While the house slept, I packed light. 1 small suitcase. 3 sweaters. My gardening gloves. Frank's flannel. My leather journal. And 1 photo. Me holding baby Ethan. Just 1. The valuables were already gone. The documents were already secure. What I left behind were just shells, clothes I hadn't worn in years, kitchen gadgets they never thanked me for using, birthday cards with my handwriting tossed in drawers. Let them have all that. Let them sort through my old life like vultures circling what they helped destroy. "I'm heading out this weekend with Margaret," I said, standing in the kitchen doorway Friday evening. "She wants company for a little road trip." Michael didn't even glance up from his phone. "Cool," Ethan muttered as he brushed past me on his way to the fridge. Rebecca was the only one who responded, and even then, it was a hollow, distracted "drive safe" as she folded laundry, more focused on separating whites from colors than my leaving. Not one of them asked where. Not one asked why. Not one offered to carry my bag. And that's when I saw it clearly. This wasn't neglect. This was calculation. They were done pretending. In their minds, I was already boxed up, labeled, shelved. "Grandma's just old. She won't be around much longer." I could almost hear their thoughts. "Let her go. We'll be here when the will is read." The suitcase sat by the door all evening. I watched them glance at the suitcase. Not one of them asked when I'd be back. They probably figured I wouldn't. And truthfully, they were right. The only lie in this trip was calling it a weekend. I wasn't coming back, not to this house, not to these people. That night I sat at the edge of my bed staring at the walls. These walls had once echoed with Ethan's laughter, held the tiny handprints from painting projects, carried the hum of Frank fixing the molding. Now they sat silent, cold, watching me leave. The alarm rang at 5:30 a.m. I moved like I was slipping through time, brushed my hair, folded the blanket, wrote nothing, said nothing. Margaret pulled up at 6 o'clock sharp, headlights low, engine rumbling like a secret we both intended to keep. I stood for a moment in the living room looking at the house that once held my life, and the people who slowly drained the meaning from it. There was no pain. Only space. I walked out the front door, suitcase in hand, closing it quietly behind me. No one stirred. Not even Ethan. As Margaret drove toward the station, she glanced my way. "They didn't ask where you were going, did they?" I shook my head. Didn't even look up. She made a small sound, a bitter little laugh. "Imagine that. You disappear and no one even notices." "I prefer it this way," I said. And I did. At the train station we hugged. Margaret pressed a small envelope into my hand. "Just in case," she whispered. I nodded. We didn't cry. Women like us who've seen births and deaths and all the spaces in between, we don't cry over freedom. The train arrived with a low roar. I boarded with my small suitcase, found a window seat and watched the town fade behind me, replaced by trees, sky and the unknown. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for decades. This wasn't running away. It was rebirth. And back in that quiet house they wouldn't even realize I was missing. Not until the towels ran out, the freezer was empty and the woman they once called grandma stopped being useful. They hadn't seen me off, but they would feel my absence. And that's a goodbye they'd never forget. Silver Pines was quiet, not lonely but peaceful. Morning birdsong. The shuffle of slippers down the hallway. The faint hum of classical music from a neighbor's unit. My room was small but clean. A bed by the window, a bookshelf, a chair that didn't creak. I hung Frank's flannel on the hook by the door. I placed the photo of baby Ethan on the windowsill, not as an invitation for memories but as a monument. Staring at that photo I finally saw it clearly. He was simply a boy I once loved, not a man who deserved to own me. That afternoon I sat at my desk and began the letter. Not to Ethan alone, to all of them. Michael, Rebecca and Ethan. I wrote their names across the top like an obituary. And then I began. I was the one who stayed up when Ethan couldn't sleep. I was the one who paid for his school, his shoes, his future. I was the one who never missed a birthday. Even when you forgot mine, I listened. I waited. I hoped. And in return you mocked my fears. You minimized my needs. You treated my presence like clutter. You laughed when I drowned. I paused, resting my hand over my heart. It wasn't racing, not like it used to whenever I faced them. It beat steady. Calm. I picked up the pen again. This isn't vengeance. I'm not punishing you. But I will no longer fund people who see my love as leverage. The university fund is gone. The inheritance will follow. I've given enough. Now I choose peace. At the bottom I didn't sign love, Grandma. I signed my full name, Charlotte Elizabeth Walker, because that's who they forgot existed. Not just Grandma. Not just Mom. But a woman. A full one. I folded the letter neatly, placed it in an envelope with no return address. No money. No photos. Just truth. I walked to the corner post office, mailed it first class and never looked back. On my way home I stopped by the garden. Some of the residents had started planting vegetables. An older man knelt, planting tomatoes, hands deep in the dirt. He looked up and nodded. "First year here?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Good place," he replied simply. "No one asks you to prove your worth here." I smiled, a real smile. That's why I came. Back in my room I brewed tea and watched the wind move through the trees. I didn't check my phone. I hadn't brought one. If they wanted to talk they'd have to find another way. One without tracking, without expectation. I had said all I needed to say. And now they'd have to sit with it. It took exactly 5 days. 5 days from when I mailed that letter until the first ripple hit. Peter told me later in one of his rare amused emails that Michael came into the office looking 10 years older and 20 pounds lighter from panic. Apparently the letter arrived at breakfast. Ethan opened it, expecting a check, a sentimental note, or instructions for claiming his inheritance. Instead he found my handwriting laid out like a mirror. No yelling. No begging. Just facts. And one sentence that likely knocked the air out of him. The university fund is gone. Redirected to a foundation that values decency over entitlement. Peter said. Ethan flushed red. Rebecca started cursing. Michael just kept repeating one thing like a broken record. But we thought she'd wait. Wait for what? For respect? For usefulness? For death? Oh. I had done enough waiting. That day, Peter delivered the final documents. Confirmation that the fund was permanently redirected, that I had revoked all digital access, that any correspondence now had to go through him. She's listed herself as unreachable, Peter told them. And she's well within her rights. I didn't hear their screaming, but I could picture it. Rebecca pacing the kitchen, furious her careful scheming had crumbled. Michael rubbing his temples as his fallback plan evaporated. And Ethan, poor Ethan, finally realizing that mocking someone into silence doesn't work when that someone leaves the room entirely. No email. No phone number. No address. Just absence. That evening I sat on my small balcony with a blanket over my knees, tea in hand, watching 2 sparrows squabble over a flower pot. It was peaceful. Not the lonely kind of quiet, but the kind you earn. Because you've done the screaming already. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't wonder if I'd gone too far. For the first time, the distance between us was honest. I hadn't disappeared. I had withdrawn. They wanted me small, quiet, compliant. Now they had it, just not the way they imagined. No more bills paid. No emergency loans. No babysitting. No college fund. Just silence. Just space. And me, Charlotte Elizabeth Walker, still breathing, still living, just elsewhere. They'll call it abandonment. They'll tell people I lost my mind, that I ran away. Let them. Because someday when the dust settles, they'll remember that I gave everything. Until it nearly killed me. And then I stopped. Not because I was cruel, but because I finally understood. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep people warm. And I refused to be their matchstick ever again. Peter forwarded me the first email 3 days later. Subject line, urgent. Please call us, Mom. It was from Michael. Full of panicked sentences, poor punctuation. We just need to talk. We're not mad. We're just really confused. We didn't know you were upset. Ethan's distraught. Please just let us explain. Explain what? That I imagined the water in my lungs? That I misunderstood their laughter? That being called a liability wasn't what it sounded like? They didn't want to talk. They wanted access. Peter asked if I wanted him to reply. I told him no. Let them sit in the echo of their own silence. That same week they called the bank. Tried to access the accounts. Denied. They emailed the Scholarship Foundation. Denied. And then came the boldest move yet, they reported me missing. An officer actually showed up at Peter's office asking if there was any concern for my safety. Peter, bless him, handed over the documentation. Charlotte Walker is of sound mind, left by choice, and is under no legal obligation to inform people she's protecting herself from. They tried again the next day, this time with Ethan calling. Peter didn't answer. Instead, he emailed me an update with the subject line, "They're scrambling." I didn't open it right away. I sat with the knowledge. Not to enjoy their panic, but to believe in my right to walk away. There's a strange guilt that creeps in when you stop mothering people addicted to your silence. Comes in waves. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe they'll change. But guilt is just the price you pay when you've been taught love should hurt. And I'm not paying that price anymore. I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. Instead, I spent the day in the garden, sinking my hands into warm soil and planting seeds like I was daring the earth to start again with me. That evening, Margaret called. "They're spiraling," she said. Words getting around. Rebecca's yoga friends are starting to whisper. One even asked if you had dementia. I laughed. Not politely, freely. Well, I said, I must be the most organized dementia patient they've ever seen. Margaret paused. You sure you're okay with them thinking you're gone? I stared out at the sunset over the marigolds. I'm not gone, I said. I'm just not available. Because that's the truth. They wanted me as a fixture. Always ready, never needed. Convenient. Disposable. Now I'm gone, but not missing. They didn't lose me. They pushed me out. And now that they can't find me, they're finally trying to listen. But it's too late for conversations. This isn't a standoff. It's a departure. And for once, they're not the ones deciding when it ends. Peter called it the moment the floor gave out. He gathered them in his office. All 3 of them, because they refused to believe it until they heard it from someone with a desk and a title. Michael came in tight-jawed. Rebecca wore her poor me cardigan. And Ethan looked like a little boy again. Not because of guilt, but because for once the world wasn't bending for him. Peter had prepared a short statement per my instructions. No small talk. No explanations. Just truth. He slid the folder across the table, looked them each in the eye and said, "This is from Charlotte Walker." Then he read, "To those who assumed my silence meant agreement. I gave everything once. I won't die twice." That line froze them. You took my time. My home. My peace. You drained me while telling others you were taking care of me. You mocked me as I drowned, then wondered why I didn't come up gasping for your approval. So let me be clear. The university fund is gone. The inheritance has been restructured. The house will be donated. My assets will not go to those who treated me like clutter waiting to be cleared. Michael tried to interrupt, but Peter raised a hand. She gave me full authority to read every word. He continued, "You will receive nothing from me in death because you gave me nothing of value in life. Not love, not respect, not care. You loved my money more than you loved me. And now the money belongs to those who still believe in kindness. Peter said. Rebecca flushed red, then pale. Ethan muttered something, but no one listened. Michael stood and shouted, "She's lost her mind." To which Peter replied calmly, "No. She found it." When Peter emailed me the full transcript later, I read it slowly, sipping tea on my balcony, wrapped in the blanket Margaret crocheted. Every word felt like air, like breath. This wasn't revenge. It was record-keeping. They had written the story. I just turned the final page. In their world, I was supposed to forgive quietly, give endlessly, and fade gently. But I didn't. I spoke. I left. I reallocated my love to those who still wanted it, not those who demanded it. At the bottom, Peter had added my final line in bold, just as I requested. "Being alone is better than being used." And that was it. The inheritance fantasy died right there in that office. Not with a bang, but with truth. They walked out in silence. Not because they understood, but because they couldn't argue anymore. Their control was gone. All that remained was the echo of what they took for granted. I didn't need to witness it. Some endings are best enjoyed from a distance. Margaret told me it started with a slammed door. Ethan stormed home from his college's financial office, folder full of bad news and mouth full of blame. No one told me the money was gone. He shouted. Rebecca snapped back. "Maybe if you hadn't laughed when she almost died, you'd still have your future paid for." Michael just rubbed his temples like he could squeeze a better past out of his head. Ethan dropped out soon after. And when his refund check never arrived, because the fund no longer existed, he finally understood. He wasn't punished. He was excluded. Margaret kept me updated on the town gossip. The church whispers. The sideways glances at the grocery store. "They say you disappeared," she told me. I smiled into my tea. "I corrected them," she said. I asked. "I told them." She withdrew her investment from a toxic enterprise. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my cup. Meanwhile, back at the lake house, the spiral deepened. Michael started drinking again. First a beer with dinner. Then wine. Then whiskey. Rebecca complained to her sister that Mom's disappearance ruined everything. But they never used the word left. In their story, I was still haunting them. Not a woman who chose herself, just someone who owed them more. But the neighborhood didn't buy it for long. Word spread quickly once Peter confirmed I was alive, well, and had moved my affairs. The people who used to nod politely at Rebecca now looked away at potlucks. Church members offered Michael thin smiles, but no more invitations. Their reputation didn't collapse. It simply eroded under the weight of truth. You mock a woman in public, strip her worth in private, and people remember. Who raised Ethan when they couldn't? Who paid for their vacations? Who baked for every funeral and never asked for thanks? Me. And now I was gone. Their social circle didn't crumble. It simply moved on without them. I didn't shout. I didn't defend. I just stopped contributing. Ethan's friends drifted after he dropped out. His phone, once a weapon of judgment, sat face down more and more. Michael and Rebecca argued louder now, their voices echoing through a house that once smelled like my lemon cake. The fridge sat empty. The mail piled up. One evening, Margaret called and said she heard Rebecca screaming on the porch. How dare she take everything? But I hadn't taken everything. I left the curtains. The dishes. The silence. They still had each other. But now they're realizing they liked me quiet because I carried their dysfunction for them. Now the weight is theirs. And I sit here on my balcony, warm tea in hand, sun on my face, surrounded by people who say please and thank you, and expect nothing more. Let them sit in the silence. It's not my job to fill it anymore.